What's the thing you did that felt both shameful and justifiable, and why? My sister got married on a hot July Saturday. I was the maid of honor, responsible for hundreds of details. 2 days before the ceremony, the vintage dress I'd rented arrived horribly stained. In a minor panic, I told my sister it looked fine from afar. I dyed it black myself, hoping the color masked the marks. It worked. Kind of. At the wedding, I was the only one wearing a dark dress among light pastel gowns. I lingered in corners where shadows hid the uneven dye. I felt pride in rescuing the situation, but shame it wasn't perfect. And worse, I had deceived my sister on her most important day. When she hugged me on the dance floor, she whispered, "You saved me." I forced a smile. My heart twisted. I didn't admit the truth until 8 months later. I confessed, "I lied to your face." She laughed, then cried, then said, "I trust you enough to know you did it out of love." That stung less but taught me. Moral ambiguity often begins in kindness but ends in confession. We both forgave, but I never wore that dress again. During my final year of college, I had a scholarship that required maintaining a 3.8 GPA. One weekend, an important exam, and a best friend in crisis, she'd attempted self-harm. She called me in tears, and I didn't hesitate. I rushed to her apartment, stayed the night, helped her through therapy calls, comforted her until dawn. I missed the exam deadline, expecting the scholarship committee to understand. I applied for an exception, but was rejected. I faced losing my funding. That's when I lied. I told the committee I'd attended a mandatory family funeral. They accepted it and restored my scholarship. Since then, I've carried the shame of twisting truth to protect someone I loved. I needed the money to continue. But at what cost? I saved a friend's life, yet gambled my own integrity. Whenever I reflect on that weekend, I feel conflicting pride, rescue and loyalty, and guilt. My truth became something I couldn't share. And some lies, even small ones, haunt the soul. I used to work graveyard shift at a convenience store to pay my tuition. One night around 2 a.m., a middle-aged man stumbled in. He looked lost, sunken eyes, unshaven, as if life had worn him down. He asked for hot coffee and a sandwich, counted out $9 measly, but was short. He paused, staring at the register briefly, embarrassed. I had $12 in my pocket. My rent cushion. I handed him $3 in change, pretending the machine malfunctioned. Later, on the way home, I played the moment back in my mind. I'd saved him from embarrassment, proud myself for caring, but also betrayed the trust of my employer. Every miscount was my fingerprint. In the following days, the register had tiny shortages. I covered them quietly, depositing small amounts from my own pocket. I justified that I'd saved a man's dignity, but I'd used my privileges to commit theft. I didn't get fired. I wasn't caught. But the weight followed me, balancing compassion and wrongdoing, pride and guilt. I left that job soon after, unable to carry that quiet crime anymore. I still think about the man's relieved smile and feel the sting of the cash I took to make it happen. My husband and I cared for his aging mother. She had dementia. She wandered, forgot things, panicked. The stress was overwhelming, but we had no choice. 1 month, we couldn't afford paid help, so I took unpaid personal leave. When the bill came, my husband printed an itemized list of my time off, shaved from both our incomes. He submitted paperwork and earned small compensation from his employer's hardship fund. I felt used. He'd monetized my sacrifice. It funded late-night coffee runs and groceries, but at the cost of my unpaid labor being reshaped into a statistic. I confronted him gently. I didn't agree to become a line item. He answered, tearful, "I wanted to help. You didn't ask for help." His reasoning felt corroded by bureaucracy. I kept the money, but I also kept my resentment, aware I'd helped my family at a cost he'd calculated in dollars. I didn't regret caring, but he monetizing it felt like profit from love, and that's a morally tangled truth. My niece, Lucy, struggled with math. She was brilliant with arts and music, but numbers crushed her. One night, I sat with her at the kitchen table. She stared blankly at geometry problems, frustration, and tears swelling. I gently guided her through the first few, but the last one, she couldn't get it. She looked at the blank page. I hesitated. Then I wrote the answer for her. She lit up. I did it. I felt a surge of pride. She smiled and hugged me. Her success felt precious. But the next day, I got a notification. Parent alert. Math grades improved suspiciously fast. Immediately, I felt shame. Not for helping, but for robbing her of the struggle that builds real mastery. Instead of teaching grit, I taught dishonesty. I sent the teacher an email confessing my role, offered to tutor her properly moving forward. The teacher responded with relief and understanding. But the smallest seed of doubt had penetrated Lucy's confidence. Now, I tutor her regularly, but also, we celebrate the attempts regardless of outcome. Because sometimes, teaching the process matters more than solving the problem. I was a nurse working night shifts in a busy ER. One night, a coworker accidentally administered the wrong dosage of medication to an elderly patient. They quietly corrected it before any harm was done. We both knew it, but no one else did. The administration launched a review, asking staff to report any near misses immediately. My coworker looked at me, fear in their eyes, and whispered, "This stays between us." I chose to stay silent. Reporting them would mean disciplinary action, possible revocation of their certification. They were a single parent, struggling. In the days that followed, I watched them break down in shifts. Relief mixed with regret. And then I felt it. Ethical betrayal. I'd swung the scales between empathy and duty, and the scales fell on silence. Weeks later, the audit ended with a reminder, not a reprimand. My coworker kept their license. I felt relief, but also guilt. I'd protected someone, yes, but had I betrayed my profession? Or the patient? That gray choice lingered every time I administered a drug. One night after class, I was giving my two friends a ride home. They were drunk and broke. They hit a drive-in store for late-night snacks. Water, chips, beer. When the cashier added up the total, they sheepishly dug through pockets and wallets. They were 15 cents short. The clerk looked at me. I realized it was her second night shift, groceries piling at home. I slid my card across the scanner, hiding the action behind a laugh at my friend's desperation. They high-fived me in the car. I felt like a hero. But later, guilt washed over me. That evening, I balanced the register cash by moving coins around to account for the extra dollars, withdrawing small amounts afterward. I had cheated the store. I kept telling myself it was for my friends. They were struggling. But the clerk's tired eyes replayed in my mind. Weeks later, I bought her a coffee anonymously with leftover change. She smiled, and in her eyes I saw relief. But I didn't find absolution. I realized compassion doesn't demand lying or theft, but sometimes people justify it. At the end of every semester, the university bookstore held a return window. I'd bought a thick textbook for $200, but the class syllabus changed, no more refunds. Yet I still needed the cash. I went anyway, slipped the receipt into the return bin, and claimed wrong edition. The cashier processed the return without much fuss and handed me the refund. Holding those crisp bills, I felt a mix. Relief at the money, fear whispering at the edges. I'd broken a policy but served my budget. In the following days, I justified it. Students got squeezed too often. But guilt grew. I'd taken from the store, which helped underfunded departments. I hadn't earned the refund. It was theft in academic guise. A week later, I found the receipt in my wallet and returned the money in cash to the counter anonymously. The bookstore manager said nothing, but the relief inside me was more about integrity than money. I still think about the faces of students who used those funds honestly. I was proud of doing the right thing, after the fact, but ashamed I'd sunk that low. Cleaning out my inbox one evening, I stumbled across a thread meant to vanish into oblivion. HR discussions about persistent harassment in another department. Our manager's signature was on the thread. Emails suppressing the concerns, dismissing them as overreactions. This wasn't my business, technically, but someone's career and dignity was on the line. I sat at my desk that night, heart pounding, debating. If I forwarded those emails, people might be protected. If I did, I'd be betraying the person who had once mentored me. I waited out the clock, stared at the blinking cursor. Finally, I typed FWD and sent it to HR, not anonymously. A few clicks, then I sat back, tense. The next day, a separate manager cornered me. "I thought you were a friend." His tone was flat, as if expecting me to confess to something terrible. I couldn't defend it with platitudes. I felt both pride, I had done the right thing, and shame. I had broken trust. When HR took action, complaints halted. But I was never the same. I stayed a bit distant, suspicious. I got promoted, but part of me felt isolated, prisoner to a decision I couldn't fully reconcile. Hero and traitor coexisted in my chest. As a new mom, I agonized over every decision. One night, on a long road trip, my toddler started crying uncontrollably. I checked every strap, every buckle, the seat was installed properly, but she refused to calm down. Ahead, a rickety old car seat hanging from a curb caught my eye. A quick judgment. Unloved, worn, but intact. I pulled over and switched the seats, replacing the pristine but uncomfortable one with a battered but familiar older seat that belonged in my grandmother's basement. My daughter calmed within minutes. I had done something right, but also illegal. The old seat lacked current safety standards. I knowingly risked her safety for immediate peace. That night, I slept with trembling guilt. My pride in restoring calm felt hollow compared to what could have been a tragedy. The next day, I bought a certified new seat, donated the old one, and buried the memory of that choice. But I still catch myself at traffic stops, eyes flicking to the back seat, wondering about the line I crossed. I was barely managing even before my second child arrived. Rent, utilities, diapers, medicine hell. My part-time job barely covered the basics, and every month felt like walking a tightrope without a safety net. I'd seen a local flyer advertising food voucher assistance. I hesitated, knowing so many genuinely desperate people needed support. But when the house echoing with emptiness became too much, I swallowed my pride. At the community center, there was a long line. I filled out the form, pausing at the question, "Reason for assistance?" My hands trembled. I glanced around, noticed a single mom ahead of me. She was crying. I leaned over and quietly slipped, "Job loss?" instead of "underemployed." It felt wrong. The volunteer nodded sympathetically, handed me vouchers, and with a trembling voice I said, "Thank you." Back home, my children cheered at the groceries. I felt momentary pride. I'd fed them. But guilt crept in like cold water. I lied. I had a job. I had hope. Then I heard later that someone on the list had been turned away, over quota. I returned the vouchers one evening, slipping them into an anonymous mailbox, tears spilling. It helped no one. I paid in shame and sleepless nights rather than money. I still ask myself, did I protect my kids, or take from someone who needed more? Sometimes morality isn't clear. It can be restroom-lit shades of gray. I volunteered to organize an art fundraiser. I was in charge of pricing paintings donated by local artists. Most suggested prices, but I tweaked them upward. Just 10–20% on behalf of the charity, I told myself. The night of the event, dozens of artworks sold, some at overvalued prices. The charity raised more money than ever before. I was proud, until I realized one painting went for nearly 3 times its fair market value. The artist, a college kid, later told me she felt weird when she saw her work sold so cheaply on resale sites. I'd lied on her behalf, taken integrity in exchange for profit. I used their trust to raise money, but betrayed their expectations of honesty. I confessed to the board, offered to return the excess, to let the artist choose to keep it. They accepted. We salvaged our integrity, but I never organized an event again, because even intentions can't excuse inflated deceit.